What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Early Read Conference Preview Series rolls on, and we move on to Conference USA. And to do that, we get the second half of the G5Hive. That's Luke Probasco at Probasco Luke on Twitter. He does work over at Fantrax, and as we said, the G5Hive. So, Luke, thank you for joining the show. I appreciate the time.
Thanks for having me on. Yeah, Justice told me a little bit about it, and he was able to go this last week, and I was on vacation, so I'm gonna tackle this week. And it sounds like we might cover Conference USA.
Yeah, pumped to have you on. So last year, this was a conference all up in arms, a lot of transitioning, a lot of new teams coming in, and Liberty pretty much blitzed the entire league in its first year in official conference, usually from the independents. They were the champions last year, and they enter as the biggest favorite of any of the conferences to win. They're the most likely team there. I'm pulling these from FanDuel. Minus 195 to win Conference USA and go back to back. Their win total stands at 10.5, with it shaded towards the over. So, Luke, before I go to you, this was a top 15 offense last year with Kadon Salter, Jamie Chadwell coming in. Really nice offense. Cooley and Salter return. Cooley, the running back, who had 1,400 yards and 16 touchdowns on the ground. They do have some turnover, though. They lose their top two receivers to Power 4 teams. They do need to replace 3 of the 5 on the offensive line. And the defense, I would say, was probably their, if anything, was their Achilles heel. They were more based around their offense. And the defense loses their best linebacker. This is a team that's top 10 in turnovers gained. Will that hold? So I think that last year's team is going to be better than what this year's team is. But does it matter? Is the gap between Liberty and everyone else just that much? Is that great that even if it is a worse Liberty team, they should blitz the entire conference?
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the betting totals, I'm here in Iowa, so I'm looking at DraftKings stuff, and it's like they're also at 10.5, and the next one is Western Kentucky at 7. Like that's a lot of variance that you have to lose. And honestly, when it comes to a Chadwell offense, they're really efficient and they're going to strike fast. And Salter enters the portal shortly. He comes back. Liberty's got different kinds of NIL money than everybody else. They've got Power 4 money in that school from alums and whatnot that you don't think about it. And as we're doing these G5Hive Worker Bee series, and we're talking to these beat reporters, and we got Kennesaw State joining the Conference USA this year. Well, they just started a football team, within the last 20 years. It's like who has graduated from there that has money to give Kennesaw State, and how connected are they to? Okay, maybe they did graduate from Kennesaw State, but they weren't a part of the football program, or that didn't exist. And why do I want to give money to a place that, like, I don't really have a tie to this or that? Again, things that are not football related. It's like that's fundraising, but it's stuff that impacts football, basketball, all those other things. So, uh, Liberty been around for a while. They've got some people who've made really good life decisions, and they also give back to the community and the program itself, and that sets them apart from a lot of other G5 schools. Like you just saw SMU, they parted over to the ACC. They have some oil money there in SMU, and they'll probably do just fine. Like, hey, ACC is like, you're not going to get any television money for like 7 years or whatever it was. We're good. We'll still make the jump. Like, we can cover ourselves. It's like, whoa, you can, like, again, travel. You got to go from, Texas, then to, your Carolinas and all the ACC schools, and you're good covering that for 7 years. And it's not football. You got to do basketball, men's and women's, and you've got maybe, I don't know what other, rowing. I don't know what they all have there, but it's like you got to do it for all the school, or like all the programs, and
Mhm.
you're front that for 7 years. Yeah, there's just different type of money there with the Liberty, and like, yeah, they did lose a lot, but I think they'll be fine, and they'll also, what they lose, they can find stuff to bring in as well.
Yeah, a lot of transfers coming in. And I think Chadwell having, I think, a floor with Salter and Cooley makes it a little bit easier to maybe take some time to transition some of these new guys. Again, I rate this Liberty team lower than last year's team. I think they will take a step back, but this team still, I think, will be in the discussion for that G5 wildcard berth. I don't think they end up getting the nod because I do think that maybe this team's a little bit more susceptible to losing a game, losing 2 games that could kind of nuke their chances. But I think you look at this team from last year, the offense still going to hum, especially in this conference. And the defense, there's still size on the defensive line that I don't think can be replicated at this level for the most part in terms of like the sheer volume of monsters on the defensive line. I mean, this is a defense that returns 51% of its production. The defensive line was pretty stout last year. Pulling up their numbers, Liberty's defense ranked 49th in yards per play, 40th in tackles for loss. The defensive line was pretty stout against the run as well, 29th in line yards. They were a little susceptible to, again, the big play, bottom half of the country, and explosive pass and run rate, but they forced a lot of turnovers, so we'll see if that makes up for it. This is a defense that relies on its athleticism quite a bit. So, Luke, as we go through the schedule, they do go to Appalachian State in week 5. I think that's kind of like a G5 preview of who could take that top spot. But
that's going to be a game that everyone should be watching if they're not already aware of it. That will be a game that could decide that playoff because App State themselves could be one of those teams that get an at-large bid or get that G5 bid, and people. It's been a while, they knock off Michigan. It's been a long time, but like this is a new App State team too, and I think that they have a really good chance of beating Liberty. And then the thing that Liberty has going against them is it's in Boone. It's at App State, and that is a tough place to play. And, if you ideally you want that game at home. So that's going to hurt for them to be on the road.
Yeah, that is the only game they will be projected underdogs is at App State. They do host East Carolina, which I think could be an interesting matchup, but Liberty will be favored in that one. And then, you talk about we're going to go through the hierarchy of the conference at large. It's Jacksonville State and Western Kentucky as the next 2 teams. Liberty plays both those teams. They both come at home. So Liberty, I think, has really the schedule to be a justified big favorite in this conference. Luke, any other thoughts on the Flames before we move down the board?
The last game of the season, November 29th, I believe, is their game. They play at Sam Houston. Sam Houston lost at Liberty last year, 16-21, and they should have beat Liberty, and they kind of let Liberty off the hook. This team, like you mentioned, loses some of that defense. Sam Houston, last game of the season, that could be one of those other games that Liberty trips up on. And depending on if you're betting over-unders at 10.5, like I feel very comfortable with 10 of those wins. 2 of them, all right, toss up here with App State, and believe it or not, Sam Houston, I think. So, I mean, personally, I'm going to probably bet the over, but there's not much juice there, especially with the juice on the over. If you want to be contrarian and bet the under, like I don't hate it, but they have to lose those 2 games, and I don't feel comfortable enough to do that.
Yeah, not much interest in me, just such a high win total. I just think, especially because I'm downgrading them, but I agree the schedule really sets up nicely for the Flames. The next team up is Western Kentucky. And Luke, I'm curious here. Some turnover. Austin Reed leaves. TJ Finley comes in. We saw TJ Finley really thrive at the G5 level at Texas State last year. He comes in. We got a new offensive coordinator coming in for the Hilltoppers. Western Kentucky now moving on to new OC Will Friend. Any thoughts on how this offense is going to look with TJ Finley coming in and losing Malachi Corley as well? The offensive line, mediocre, I think, relative to Western Kentucky standards last year. Any thoughts here on the Hilltoppers offense?
So again, I'm going to refer to a lot of the G5Hive, Hive Worker Bee series. We met with Matt McKay with the towel rack at WKU. They're, the boots on the ground. If you want to know information, we're going to have it, and we're going to talk to the people that know the teams the best. Like you said, Will Friend comes in here. He was previously the offensive line coach at Mississippi State. So you're like, oh, okay, they're going to run the ball. Nope. I mean, this is still going to be a team that throws the ball pretty similar. TJ Finley comes in, but the other part going into the last year is Caden Veltenkamp was told he was going to be a tight end. He was a quarterback. He was told he was going to be a tight end before the bowl game. And then Austin Reed doesn't play, I believe is how it goes. They start with another quarterback. He throws like a pick six. They throw him in there. He throws for like over 400 yards. He's the MVP. And then he enters the portal, and then he comes back, and it's like, okay. And then and all that happens, and then TJ Finley comes in. So it's like, okay, well, what's going on there? Well, it sounds like TJ Finley's got the leg up right now, so it's going to be TJ Finley there, and I would expect a lot of the same offensive scheme wise, passing a lot, high flying. They've honestly, ever since Zappy left, it hasn't necessarily been the same, and I think it's just because Zappy was so good, and the guys at receiver were so good there. And like you said, Malachi Corley leaves. There's no Malachi Corley on this team. Like, you can't do screens. He was the Yak King. We don't have guys like that at Western Kentucky. So they will throw. It won't. You shouldn't be thinking that this is the Western Kentucky team from like 3 years ago. It's not that, or 2 years ago, whatever it was. But it is going to be an air raid with more and just a few wrinkles here and there.
Yeah. So this is, again, a quick twitch offense. They're trying to get the ball out as fast as possible. And I think this air raid style, again, it doesn't lead to a lot of negative plays, especially sacks, but this is a certain type of offense that TJ Finley should feel pretty accustomed to after coming from Texas State, a similar type offense. I think there is a downgrade there. I mean, Western Kentucky, bottom half of the country in terms of offensive returning production. I agree. I think big drop off coming without Malachi Corley. That's a third round, I believe, to the Jets. So that's a pro player they lost, and that means a lot. On the defensive side of the ball, big drop off last year. Tyson Summers is back, but this team is bottom half of the country again in terms of defensive returning production. And this was a defense, poor tackling all year. Not a lot of negative plays. Their defensive line was 131st in line yards. Not much push up front, 121st in tackles for loss. A poor unit overall, and you saw that over the year really take a step back as the year went on. Relied a lot on turnovers. I think that's also part of the competition. They were second in turnovers gained last year. I get that Western Kentucky has maybe more talent, with especially with a guy like Finley, that teams don't have in the conference. But this schedule does not do the Hilltoppers much favors, in my opinion, especially with a lot of transition on the offense side of the ball that needs to bail out a poor defense. They open at Alabama. They play home to Toledo, which is one of the higher end G5 teams. And they go to Boston College. So it's a pretty tricky non-con. Squeezed in there is also a conference game at Middle Tennessee, at Murfreesboro. We're going to talk about them in a little bit. They also go to Liberty and close Jacksonville State. So it's a tough finish here. Again, I don't know if I'm interested in going under the 7.5 win total, but a team that's like 450 to win the conference are seen as like a clear second choice. Again, I have like way too many questions to take a shot at Western Kentucky. How do you see it, Luke?
I actually feel pretty comfortable betting the under on this one. Juice is on the over. I have them at here. So they're at 7 wins on DraftKings. I feel like there are 5 games that are definitely winnable. More than a 50-50 shot. And then there's 4 games that you're losing, like Boston College, Alabama, but then you got your winnable games there against, Eastern Kentucky, things like that. And then I've got like 3 toss-up games. So I'm like, okay, well, if the over-under's at 7 and I feel comfortable that they win 5, they have to win all 3 of those games. Otherwise, it's a push. And it's like, okay, do I want to bet on a push? But it's like they have to win all 3 of those coin flip games. So I feel good about going on the under here.
Yeah, that would be where I lean as well. I just think there's not much margin for error for a team that has been, regularly on the top of this conference, especially under Helton. But I think that there's definitely some questions heading into this season that leave me a bit concerned about the Hilltoppers going into 2025. Jacksonville State, this is a team I was high on last year as they entered FBS. They had a win total of 4.5, and that was one of our best bets on the show. They crushed that. I think they went over it before Halloween. It was pretty easy there for Rich Rod and Zion Webb. Win total now 7.5. They're plus 750 to win the conference. So a huge change in expectation. They obviously weren't eligible last year. New quarterback gone, Zion Webb, or new quarterback coming in, Zion Webb is gone. Based on I believe you guys did Jacksonville State on the Worker Bee series. Any
Yep.
thoughts here on if Zion Turner, the UConn transfer, could come in and it would be a Zion redux here with Rich Rod's offense, or could it be the returning Logan Smothers?
You know, what's going to happen here is they've got a whole bunch of just quarterbacks in general. And we talked with Thomas Ashworth, who covers the team there. And Rich Rod just has this mentality that if one quarterback sucks, we got another quarterback that's going to be in there, and if he sucks, we're going to have another quarterback, and if he sucks, we're going to have another. They have so many quarterbacks, and Rich Rod likes to run their quarterbacks. So like honestly, it doesn't really matter who starts day one. Like they might not be there after day three, and it might
Yeah.
just be a one game here or there. So when you're looking at it holistically from a wins loss record, like hey, all these guys can run the ball. That's what they're going to do. They're going to run the ball a whole bunch. They're going to be fast paced, and like I said, those quarterbacks are pretty deep. So you got a lot of guys. There's even like he's a quarterback on the team. He will be a weapon. His name is Carter Lambert. He's a 4-4 guy, but he's going to be a tight end. He's going to be a running back. He's going to be a wide receiver. He will pretty much do everything but throw the ball. Like I said, he's a 4-4 guy, and people probably aren't talking about him. He's not a starter or anything, but like he's a weapon, and he's going to be out there. And they want to run the ball, and they want to be fast, and they want to be quick
Yeah.
tempoed. And honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if starting quarterback's a little bit winded, and they just throw in another quarterback because we're here to run the ball. And they're on DraftKings here is at 8, and the juice is on the under, and I would be in on the under here as well because there's 5 games I feel really good about them winning, and then there's like 3 toss-ups. So it's like, hey, they got to win all 3 of those to hit 8. They did bring in a lot of guys last year from the University of Louisiana Monroe, and they won, and Louisiana Monroe was not happy because hey, we haven't won a bowl game in so long, and you're doing that with a different team, and you were a part of our team and whatnot. But like Rich Rod is going to do his thing with quarterbacks and running. You got what was it? No shoelace tie-in Denard Robinson, for the University of Michigan there. But yeah, that's what they're going to do. So like honestly, you can put whatever name you want there at quarterback. They're just going to run the ball.
You look at who's back for them. Lewis and Wiggins are both back at running back. They get Andrew Paul, a former Georgia recruit. He couldn't really catch on there, but the offensive line was real good last year. This is a run-based offense that likes to set up bomb pass plays. So I think we know. I mean, Rich Rod. I'm not saying like we know it's going to be like predictable and bad, but we know that this team can really cook on offense with that tempo. I do think the defense is going to take a step back, though. Zach Alley, he ends up getting a new job at now I'm drawing a blank, but he ends up getting the job at the University of Oklahoma. He takes over as DC there. So huge promotion for him. They do get Luke Olson as DC, but 117th in defensive returning production and defensive talent. So I think that we might see a bit of a drop off there for what was, especially at this level, a nasty defense. I mean, this defensive line was among the best in the G5. These are national ranks for Jacksonville State on the line. They were 10th in sacks, 4th in defensive line yards, 1st in defensive EPA rush per play. So this was a nasty run defense. So I think that we're going to see a big drop off on that side. Again, another team where I have questions at the top of the board where I think that we're going to see a pretty, I think, still good, but a decent downgrade. They go to Liberty and Western Kentucky in conference play. In non-con, they host Coastal Carolina. They'll be favored in that game, but wouldn't say that's a surefire win. At Louisville, that they will be big underdogs in that game. So it's hard for me to be super confident about Jacksonville State heading into year 2 at the FBS level. But I see why the win total is high. I don't know if I'm like inclined to be confident in the under. I think I maybe trust them a little bit more than Western Kentucky, but questions nonetheless. So after those 3, Luke, or did you have something else to say?
I know you asked about the quarterback play, and I said it doesn't really matter, but I do want to give the listeners like who it is going. It's going to be Logan Smothers. That is who's going to at least start. So whatever. Maybe we're playing prop bets for players or whatnot, he's going to be the guy to start at least.
That's what I thought too.
So I do want to give that, piece of information out there. But yeah, like you said, that defense, they graduate a lot. They got a lot of guys that are transferring out. Fred Perry is the guy that returns on that defense as safety, as the guy with the most tackles on that team. He had 75 last year, a year ago. Mainly it's going to be a lot of the defensive secondary is what comes back, and it doesn't really matter if you don't get pressure, like you said.
Yeah.
Those defensive line stats, like you could have so many great cornerbacks out there, and if the quarterback's got all the time in the world to throw, he's going to get a completion. So what's more remarkable about those stats about defensive line is that offense plays so fast that the defense is out there a lot, and they still were as efficient as they were. So yes, this as it comes from linemen and themselves, it'll be Curly Young Jr. and Jalen Swain coming back as the leaders, and they had, between the two of them, 63 tackles themselves and 8.5 sacks. So they do have a couple, production stuff coming back, but it will be a lot different.
Yeah, totally. So after these three, there's a significant drop off, like almost literally a proverbial cliff, I would say, because now you go from these teams with either 10.5 wins, 7.5 wins. Now we have a handful at 4.5 wins. So I do think this is where, in my opinion, you got to take your stance on, okay, I'm in on this team, I'm out on this team. I think this team's going to be pretty decent and go bowling. I think this team is going to suck and win 3 or 4 games. Like, this is where I think the meat is going to come from in terms of maybe projecting forward, and maybe you could find some diamonds in the rough. I have a few, Luke. We didn't really chat about it offline, so I'm excited to hear who you think. We'll start with Sam Houston State, who you mentioned a bit before. Their win total's 4.5, shaded towards the over. 17-1 to win the conference. This was a team last year that made the jump to the FBS ranks, like Jacksonville State. Didn't have as good a fortune. A lot of injuries and really ineffective offense. They only won 3 games last season, arguably the worst offense in the Power 5 ranks. They lost 6 games by 1 score, including 2 in overtime, a lot of that coming because of the offense. So the defense was real good, right about the national average in terms of EPA per play. They were really competitive, kept them in games. They return top 3rd in the country production there. They're 41st in returning production on the defensive side of the ball. A few guys back on offense as well. We will talk about the quarterback in a sec, but Noah Smith is back. He had 101 targets. Adaye, who got hurt at wide receiver, he's back. They get Jay Drucker from Memphis. He transfers in after an injury-riddled 2023. So is there a leap coming for the Bearcats in year 2 at the FBS ranks, you think?
I believe that this team, they are sitting at 4.5 on DraftKings. I think Sam Houston will play for the conference championship against Liberty. And I think Sam Houston, if that offense is clicking, they could beat Liberty.
Wow, that is okay. Hot. I'm glad I asked first. Hot and heavy. I have less of an opinion, so I'm going to let you go a little bit on why. I imagine you're buying like a big offensive improvement, right?
Yes. Well, so they had a lot of guys that were hurt last year. They lose a lot of 1-score games. We just see it just like in the NFL. The Minnesota Vikings, like a couple years ago, they're like some absurd, like 12 games within like 3 points or 7 points, and they won everything. And then the next year they lose everything. Like, I think Sam Houston, if I'm remembering everything correctly, they were like the last FBS team to get a win, and
that is correct.
They let Liberty off the hook. And like I said earlier last year, it was I think it was 21-16. I mentioned, like, they almost beat Liberty last year. No one's talking about that. When it comes to, we do all of these previews, and when we talk to Ben Sorrells, the CEO of the Cat Fund, part of their collective, they're going to be a pass-heavy team. They're going to be one of those teams that the pass opens up the run. So there will be running. They do get some guys back there. You got John Gentry comes back. Zach Harbuck. They've got some guys that were hurt that are coming back there. So they're going to have about 3 backs that they rotate through that will eat into each other's work. Noah Smith was the only player on this team that played in every single game, I believe. Offense or defense. And that was, they got a guy coming back Quavez Humphreys, wide receiver, they think he's actually the number one guy there at Sam Houston. So if Noah Smith is your number 2 guy, then that's, Quavez Humphrey is a talk around Sam Houston, and not a lot of people are knowing. And if you play college fantasy football, you need to know Quavez Humphreys. The other name you need to know, they bring in Jace Bauer from Central Michigan. Go into that interview like, all right, like, what do we need to know about Jace Bauer? And he's a running guy, like he can run, he can throw, whatnot. They're like, whoa. You need to talk about Hunter Watson, JUCO transfer from Iowa. He's out on the western part of the state. I can't remember the community college that he's a part of, but you need to know Hunter Watson. He's, he kind of came in with the idea that he would be the backup, but he's pushing, and he's actually like, hey, you got to take a pulse right now. Who's got the job? He's like, everything I've watched, seen, heard, I got to lean Hunter Watson right now. So like Jace Bauer might come in there and he might be the number 2. But Hunter Watson, they won a national championship at the JUCO level. Like, he's done all the right things, it sounds like. And if he's dotting everybody up and he can do things, like, that's going to be huge. And I think 4.5, like, I feel like this, like, I feel very comfortable at 6 wins, and they're at 4.5. So I feel very good about smashing the over. Granted, the juice is on the over, but I don't want to take the under. Like I said, like, I feel like, they have a chance to play for the conference championship in this game, or this conference.
This is why, like, having you and Justice on has been so helpful for me in these conferences, because I look through the depth charts, right? I can only scrape so much info, right? But I mean, really learning that Hunter Watson is actually potentially the guy who has the leg up in the race. Because to me, Jace Bowers, I saw him at Central Michigan. I'm not like overly impressed with him. But to me, look, Hunter Watson, maybe he doesn't make the jump to this level from the JUCO ranks, but like that to me provides like maybe some more optimism. Or, I mean, first of all, it's a pretty low expectation, I'd say, for Sam Houston. So get it, to me, like, there's some upside there that really, I think, is exciting. So that's really exciting to me about Sam Houston, and maybe change my opinion of them. I will say, though, the only caution I have with them is the schedule, because this is a team that on paper is like a typical take a leap team. They're 17th in returning production this year. They bring back a lot, like we mentioned before, the 1-score games, the injuries, like a lot of indicators pointing up for Sam Houston. My only issue, though, is the schedule. They open at Rice, who should be much improved this year. Then they go to UCF. They host Texas State, who, in my opinion, is arguably the best team in the group of 5 ranks. So it is a tricky schedule. They don't really get any breaks in Conference USA either, because they play Western Kentucky, but they get a bye before. They go to Jacksonville State and then host Liberty the last game of the season, as we were talking about before. So while I agree with you on the bullishness, I just wish the schedule was a little bit easier, right? Like, they kind of get screwed. They kind of get the short end of a stick here.
The other thing to note too, we I don't know how many we've done so far, but interviews wise, so there's 64 teams, including UMass and UConn, who are currently independents.
Yep.
But we've got them all scheduled, and we're in the single digits, and there are only 2 teams so far. The other team we will talk about here too in this conference, but so far there are only 2 teams across the whole G5 that brings back the entire offensive line. Sam Houston is one of them. So bringing that continuity is a big thing, where, I said that their pass sets up their run. Well, I think they'll be able to run the ball a lot better this year. They'll be able to protect a quarterback better if they want to run with the quarterback. If it's Jace Bauer, that's fine. To be honest, it's not like Shoemaker was like lit the world on fire as a passer, and you kind of mentioned, with Jace Bauer, like, you've got your reservations around that, which I totally agree, but I also agree he's a better passer than Shoemaker, and it's
I agree with
like that. And like Noah Smith went off, and it's like, oh, if you get just marginally better at quarterback, like, he could really go off. And if Hunter Watson is even better, well, man, this team has a lot. And like I said, I feel comfortable with the over. Like you said, the schedule does have, its ups and downs, But when you mentioned that tier break, it's like 4.5 wins here. Like, I think they can be the best. Like, everybody's chasing Liberty in this conference. So it's like, who's going to go for that last spot to face Liberty? And I think Sam Houston can do it. And they play him that last game of the year.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And as we were discussing, bringing back the all the offensive line, maybe it's you look at week one. Not that we're giving out a bet right now, but Sam Houston Rice, like maybe Sam Houston's offense is better than expected, and that total sitting at 48.5, I believe, when I looked at it last. Yeah, 48.5. Maybe Sam Houston's offense is being rated like last year's team, and maybe that team, that offense especially, is going to be more like markedly better. So maybe that's like a way to bet on their offense being better without like net like a what is it, like tangential way of betting on Sam Houston's
Yeah.
offensive.
And honestly, in that game itself, Rice returns 21 of
Mhm.
22 offensive players from last year. That team's way better. And then they bring in EJ Warner, son of Hall of Famer Kurt Warner, come in there. That might be a good just over bet for that game
Yeah,
in
maybe that's the one.
particular. Because if I'm trying to remember, I believe betting odds, it's like 55 is kind of that magic number with college football, or maybe it's 45.
51, 55,
50.
48, and 49 fall in there. Those are kind of the average numbers. There's some
Yeah.
other ones, but 48
So
and a half is right around like that sweet spot of what you're looking for on college football totals.
did you say what did you say the over under for that game was?
48 and a half. So again, maybe that's
I
last year's
think
Sam Houston team,
yeah,
not
I think
this
I
year's what we
feel
think.
like Granite Rice's defense will be good, but I think that's a one I would feel comfortable taking the over in that one.
Cool. Let's move on though to Middle Tennessee State, because I think this is a team that I was under on last year. I thought the schedule was too difficult. I thought that the team wasn't where it wanted to be. Win total was 6.5 last year. It's now 4.5 for new coach Derek Mason. And I think this offense, you think Sam Houston State, I think Middle Tennessee with Bodie Reeder coming in. He was a offensive coordinator at Utah State. He was also an offensive coordinator at North Texas and Eastern Washington, where they average over 43 points per game. They bring back, I always say his name wrong, but Nick Vaasho. He was a 3,000-yard passer last year. So I think there might be talent here on the roster for Middle Tennessee's offense to play much, much better relative to last year. And frankly, I mean, this was a team that nearly beat Missouri last year. So I don't think it's all for naught. The offense last year ranked 69th in EPA per play. They were able to hit a lot of explosive plays. So maybe with a little bit more improvement and a better offensive scheme, and the offense could take another step up in the defense. That's probably where the rub is. They're 124th in returning production, so it's a big question mark. Derek Mason, maybe this drop in class could revive his career as a defensive mind. Defense was pretty stout against the run last year, but again, not a lot back. So, Luke, any thoughts here on the Middle Tennessee State team? Again, win total about 4.5. They're 25-1 to win the conference.
I wouldn't mind sprinkling a little, them to be in the conference championship or whatnot, but like you said, right around this 4.5. Middle Tennessee for DraftKings is at 5. So like
Okay.
if you can get the FanDuel at 4.5, I would take the over, because even at 5, I have the over. I have 6 games where I feel that they can win. I have 4 games I'm like, oh, those are losses, and then 2 games like, okay, I just need you to. You can lose both of them, and you're still on the over.
Yeah.
It's even betting. There's no juice on the over under for DraftKings, but we interviewed Jake Bolden for the Blue Raider Pod. He covers the team over there. You got Derek Mason coming in. He is a defensive minded head coach. Comes in from Oklahoma State, but he was previously the Vanderbilt head coach in 2014 to 2020. Yeah. And then Bodie Reeder most recently comes from University of Northern Iowa as the offensive coordinator. And then you got Brian Stewart, the DC. He comes in from the XFL Houston Roughnecks, but he also had a stint with the Dallas Cowboys when the Dallas Cowboys defense was good a few years ago. But they are moving away from the air raid. So they're going to run the ball a little bit more. So Nick Vadiato, we had a player interview with him. You can catch that at the G5Hive. But he talked a little bit about this, like, hey, what's it like going through an offensive coaching change. Like, what do you got to do? How much time? Because, like, you're the starter. Well, now you got to learn a whole new playbook. And you got to look at film. They're also defense is going to be a 3-3-5 defense, but they also bring in a guy, Omari Kelly. He's, I believe, a 4-star from Auburn, and they're expecting big things out of him in the wide receiver spot. Cameron Lacey, another wide receiver that they're expecting great things out of. But Nick Vadiato is a great name to know. I think he's going to sling the ball around. Like, they will. They're one of those teams that, like, people get really upset about. They're at the 2-yard line and they're in the shotgun and they're like, why don't you just, gun under the formation? But, like, that's not what they ever practice. So then you could fumble the ball and stuff. Well, now they're working a lot more under that. So you're going to see a little bit more of Frank Peasant running the ball. And you're going to see some naked boots that you didn't see before. It won't be a whole bunch different, but it's just not going to be what they had last year in that air raid. So because them changing things up in that sense, I think they might not be able to click as much. So I don't think that it's smashing the 5 over, but I do feel comfortable that they will get 5 over. But that's kind of where I have, with all the stuff that's coming back from Sam Houston and the steps that they can take, why I have them kind of over Middle Tennessee in that regard.
Which makes sense, right? And the market kind of shaded that way as well. The non-con is not very easy. They do open against Tennessee Tech. That is a very likely win, but then they go to Ole Miss, and then it's right into conference play. They host Western Kentucky, host Duke, and at Memphis for their non-con. They do have likely wins on the schedule, including Kennesaw State and New Mexico State, but games you probably wish were at home, like at Louisiana Tech, at UTEP, at FIU, those are ones you're probably going to have to go 2-1 to get over. But I think there's stuff here. So, I mean, speaking to the quarterback, the offensive line does have some turnover. Did he seem to be concerned about that? I know that, I mean, look, anytime you're redoing the offensive line, there's always a concern. But at least it's veterans, it's seniors and juniors along the offensive line and even backing up in some positions. So I do think at least there's some experience. What are your thoughts there on the offensive line?
Yeah. There didn't seem to be a concern around, the line play. And when we talked to Nick, I mean, he felt pretty good about them. And it's just learning more so the playbook and whatnot, which you got a lot of time to do that, but there's no way you're going to be able learning it and executing it are two different things. And it'll probably be one of those two, you mentioned, those games out the gate where it's like, okay, well, there's good that there's some of those like built-in losses. Cause like we need to practice, like, Duke's got a new head coach. We'll see what that looks like, but like more than likely a loss, but we'll see. And they'll be one of those teams I think gradually gets better over the year.
Yeah. So another team in this 4.5 range, Louisiana Tech. To me, of this group, Sonny Cumbie's on the hottest seat. Maybe like the arrows pointing down on this team. This was a group that I kind of took a flyer on last year. I thought could maybe play a way above expectation with Hank Bachmeier. Didn't really get off the ground. A lot of quarterbacks in the mix here. So, Luke, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that. Marquise Crosby had an injury-riddled 23. He's back, and they get a Davenport from Texas State. I mean, offensive line wasn't great last year, and they're counting on some transfers to shore it up. Do you think Jack Turner, who showed some flash at points last year, can secure the job here, or will it be like Ty Keys from Southern Miss or Evan Bullock, the redshirt freshman?
So we talked to Ben Carlisle, part of the Bleed Tech Blue, and he says it's Jack Turner's job to lose. He's also very high on Davenport there from Texas State, but he didn't have a huge role at Texas State. So he's very curious about, like, okay, what do you do? You're used to getting like 6 or 8 touches a game. Well, now if you get 15, what does that look like? So he was very good. He talked very highly of Davenport, and then Jackson there at wide receiver felt pretty good with them. But they're going to run the ball a lot, and they're probably going to run it to the left side based off of who they got returning. You got Burt Hale as their starting left guard, and then they brought in a transfer to shore up the left tackle spot, if I'm remembering correctly. So I think they're going to be running to the left side a little bit, but they try to be a balanced offense. The thing that I think will be their maybe their Achilles heel or that thing that holds them back. They bring in a new defensive coordinator, Jeremiah Johnson. He was the defensive coordinator at UNI, another Northern Iowa coordinator going in the conference here. Last year they played a 4-3 defense, and now they want to play a 3-3-5 defense. If you know anything about defenses, a 4-4-3, like you can get after rusher, like you can get after the quarterback. If you want a 3-3-5 defense, you need like fat guys that plug up holes that, you're not going to get a lot of sacks, but you're going to free up your linebackers to do a lot of that work. And going from a 4-4-3 to a 3-3-5, I find that to be very, very challenging. And I think, if you have to put up points, Louisiana Tech is not going to be able to match, blow for blow with a lot of these teams. If I've got to put up 35 points, 28 points, every single game. So but I mean, he did mention like this new coordinator in Jeremiah Johnson. He wants to run a defense that fits the talent. So, I mean, those are two different things. So what am I going to see? Am I going to see a 3-3-5? Well, it's like whatever the talent is here, which the talent is you've got guys from the old regime, or you got guys from the old regime of that defensive coordinator that's used to running a 4-3 defense, and you come in here wanting to run a 3-3-5. Well, if I don't have the talent to run a 3-3-5, which more so is like physical,
Yeah.
I don't have, these big fat defensive linemen, then that's going to be tough. So I think he might start in a 3-3-5 and then switch to a 4-3 defense in the middle of the season, or you might see some things different. And because of that, I mean, as people, we like habits. We do the same thing over and over. And It's like, okay, I know a 3-3-5 defense works. This is what I'm comfortable with. I'm going to go to this new area. Well, the thing I am comfortable with is my defense. Well, getting people to fit that defense, sometimes you're fitting a square peg in a round hole and it won't work. And in general, I think that's what's going to start happening is, hey, we're going to run a 3-3-5. Now, can you adjust to notice that we don't have the guys to run a 3-3-5? So this is one of those teams that I feel DraftKings are 5. I feel very confident in 2 wins. And then I've got like 3 that are like up in the air. So like, hey, they need to win all of those 3 to get to 5 here on DraftKings. So I feel good betting the under. And I think it's mainly because of that shift in the defense. Because then if you're letting up a lot of points, and you're trying to figure this out, and then, after some losing, how does that locker room go?
Yeah.
But then I want to highlight Louisiana Tech as being one of those teams that we're sitting a year later to, fast forward a year, we're talking about, hey, Louisiana Tech's taking that next jump and being one of those teams because now they can recruit and get their guys to do that 3-3-5 defense.
Yeah, I mean, I will say, first of all, fantastic analysis on the defense. I will say, though, the upside, the defense can't get much worse relative to last year. This was a team that was 100th in EPA per play. They allowed nearly 3 points per drive. They only had 16 sacks on the year. That was 127th in the country. Bottom 10 in EPA per rush, explosive pass defense. They only I mean, just awful numbers. So it can't get much worse. So they have that going for them. But I mean, you mentioned changing scheme. They're 98th in talent. They're outside the top 100 in terms of returning production. They lose their top 4 tacklers. So I just think they're really up against it. And you look at this trajectory for Sonny Cumbie in Ruston. To me, it looks like a guy who's on his way out of a job if like this goes the way it appears. 3-9 the last 2 years. 2-6 in conference USA. It just feels like if this gets off to the wrong foot, it could get away from him. The schedule is also one of those bizarre ones with the double bye. They play Nichols in week 1. I imagine they will get off to a 1-0 start. And then they get a bye. And then they play 3 games. And then it's 8 straight to close the year. So I don't think there's really an advantageous scheduling spot for this team. I will say possible wins on the schedule. They could win. I mean, it's Conference USA, so the gap isn't that crazy. But outside of Jacksonville State, they are pretty similarly rated to all the teams they're playing at home. That's Nichols, Tulsa, Middle Tennessee, UTEP, and Kennesaw. Road games, at FIU and at New Mexico State, you probably got to get a few of the one or two of those to get over this win total. I lean towards the under as well. I just think that the talent isn't on hand here. Team that I think has some sneaky upside, though, you see another drop in the odds, though, 60-1 to win the conference. It's UTEP plus money to the over 4.5. This looks like Scotty Walden is trying to bring his Austin P team to the FBS ranks, bringing in 10 players with him from Austin P last year. And this is an Austin P team. I know it's FCS ranks. I know there's a drop off, but they went 9-3 last year. They played Tennessee. Not that they almost won, but they lost by 17. And that's pretty impressive. The year before that, they played at Western Kentucky in a 7-4 season. They lost 38-27. So UTEP, a team that was going nowhere last year, can they hit the ground running here and maybe catch some fire similar to how, maybe Kurt Signetti did with James Madison last year. Even Rich Rod did with Jacksonville State last year with kind of this Austin P UTEP hybrid type model. Luke, any thoughts here on the Miners?
So Scotty Walden is this guy that has a whole I think he's going to really change that culture there. He's an exciting guy. You see, like during the winter, he was at men's basketball games ripping off his shirt and he had his body painted. Like there was just a clip I shared with Justice a week ago. He was in the weight room and he like body surfed over people. Like he's a guy that players want to play for. And I think as corny as it sounds, like that's something that means something to these
Yes, 100%.
players. At DraftKings here, I see a 4, and I've got like 4 toss-up games because I really don't know how that offense is going to be. I think it has the potential. I'm really excited for UTEP moving forward. If this isn't the year, I really feel good about their overs going forward. But what they're going to do here, Scotty Walden, like you mentioned, coming from the FCS and Austin P, he led the team to 2 league championships. He brings in a co-OC, Jake Brown, who is the co-OC at Louisiana Tech, and then also brings in his guy to also get that co-OC in Ryan Stanchek, who's at Austin P, brings in defensive coordinator JJ Clark from Austin P. So there's a lot of guys that coming over, but the name, a big name to know here is Javon Jackson, a running back from Austin P.
Mm-hmm.
And he likes to feed one guy, and there aren't too many teams in college football that like to feed one guy. Now, the thing with that is if you feed one guy and then that guy gets hurt, like how does everybody else do? I think this team, what they're going to do offensively, they used to be kind of more methodical and they would take their time and then they would take the play clock and they would do this. They're going to have a quick offense. It's going to be bam, bam, bam. There's going to be a lot of offensive plays. So if it comes for over unders in games or total points for UTEP themselves in particular games, I think you're going to find your edge in betting UTEP overs. And I like to personally bet first half overs because I get screwed a lot in the overall games. So I would feel really good when you're grab those first couple edges in those weeks of UTEP overs. They're going to have a quick offense, snap the ball faster than ever. We talked with Zay Galindo with covers there at UTEP, and that's what he's seeing, and he was really excited about it. Based off of what I have here is like, I believe they play Kennesaw State, right?
Yes.
That's one game I feel really confident that they can win. Everything else is like, okay, 50-50. So it's like, okay, for the DraftKings, I need them to win all of those 50-50s. So I'm probably betting the under this year. But also if they go over, because right now the juice is the over. So like if I want to bet this, I'm going to bet the under because that's I can get a little bit more payout there. But this team is going to be exciting going forward. And if they do take, like you said, you're kind of excited for this year, and I don't blame you. They've got a lot of things that can work. Now it's just, will they work?
Yes.
We'll see, and we'll see things early. And I would say if you do want to get a part of UTEP, bet the first half overs.
Yeah, I would say so. It's funny you say that because we were talking about Sam Houston over 48.5. I bet a few weeks ago UTEP Nebraska over in week 1 because of that offense. And even if they get dump truck, the speed in which they're playing is just going to give Nebraska an offense also on the rise. It's going to give them more opportunities to score as well. And I think that offense would like to put up a number, I think, given where that offense has been the past few years. So I agree with you. I think that this UTEP offense is going to cook. And me personally, when I'm looking at this, I like when there's a seismic change in a philosophy or a team and the market isn't giving them much credit. Like, again, the win total is 4.5. So even if they're still bad, if they're just a little bit better, they're going to be, they could easily clear this total, or maybe they could catch a team off guard. And worst case, again, it's a 4.5 win total. They don't need to be that good to get over this number. The schedule, the non-con doesn't give much. They're going to lose 3, and then they play Southern Utah. That's probably a win. They host FIU, they host Kennesaw, and they host New Mexico State. So I think they get those 4. It's where does the other one come from? Is it home Sam Houston? Is it at Louisiana Tech? Is it home Middle Tennessee? So I do think at plus money, there's something cooking here for the Miners. Luke, before we move on, any thoughts on the quarterback play? Is it going to be the UTEP transfer, or is it going to be Cade McConnell, who finished the job last year when UTEP kind of was a little bit more frisky?
It is currently going into fall camp, which I don't know if they are going to start this. If they started this week or if they start next week, but it's Cade McConnell is the guy to start out. He's
okay.
The guy.
He's not bad. What was it? I'm drawing. Locklear is the Austin Peay transfer, I believe.
I don't recall off the top of my head, but yeah, I mean,
you can pretty much undersized.
You can pretty much it's just like when Cam Ward went from Incarnate Ward to Washington State, and there was a lot of Incarnate Ward people that kind of went over it, and when Cinetti goes from James Madison to Indiana, and Indiana is pretty much James Madison. Yeah. I mean, this is the same. There's a lot of Austin Peay guys that come over, but we kind of saw. I mean, grant they're different levels, but I'm trying to remember his name. Head coach there went from Sacramento State to Stanford. Brought a lot of his guys from Sacramento. Troy Taylor brought in a lot of guys, and you saw a lot of glimpses. Like, did great against Colorado, but like they were the under. It's going to take a little bit, but you kind of like what things are doing. I know it's not G5 related and Conference USA related, but it's like I like what Stanford's doing. Like Stanford's going to be a great team. To me, probably betting overs over there as well.
So New Mexico State, this was a team that was in the Conference USA title game, and you're like, why are they at 4.5, shaded towards the under, 80-1 to win the conference this year? Well, it's because they lost pretty much everybody from the team last year, including head coach Jerry Kill, quarterback Diego Pavia. I mean, all players of substance, really. They lose 15 of their top 18 tacklers. It's a full do-over. I don't have much to say here because I think it's a big question mark. So, Luke, I will leave it to you, the expert, if you have any compelling thoughts on New Mexico State. For me, it's a total stay away because I don't really know what's going to be here. They promote their wide receiver coach, Sanchez. I would say if there's returning production, it's on the offensive line, but that's pretty much it. Last I saw was nobody separated in terms of quarterback competition. It could be like one of four players.
Yep, that's the same thing. Just talked with Adam Young. That episode released, I believe, earlier in the week. You're right. Head coach Tony Sanchez comes in. He was the wide receiver coach. Last year, you got OC Tyler Wright. He was a special teams coordinator and the tight end coach for the team last year. And then they bring in defensive coordinator Joe Morris, who's at Sam Houston State last year. This is going to be a run-heavy team. Why? You kind of alluded to it earlier, and I talked about it even sooner, about the offensive line. There are 2 teams in all of G5 currently that bring back all of their offensive line guys. New Mexico State is that other team. They did not lose any offensive line guys, so they are going to run the ball. It's going to be the Monte Watkins show for the first probably 4 weeks. It's going to be, all right, which quarterback can hand the ball off the best as they just run the ball. Another guy to know that only had a few plays last year is Tim Gans. He'll get some time at running back. But the defense also loses a whole bunch of players. Like, people loved Kill, and it's going to be hard to replace. Like you said, they were playing for the conference championship last year. They're going to take a steep decline. No one's made a name or taken that job at quarterback. They're going to run. They're going to lean on Monte Watkins. They're not going to throw the ball a lot. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They lost 7 of their top 8 pass catchers, including running backs, tight ends, wide receivers. So, they're not going to be passing the ball, a whole bunch. And like I said, they bring back the whole offensive line. So you got a couple good running backs coming back. You got a quarterback that you're trying to figure out, and wide receivers that you're trying to figure out. And we're trying to figure out this defense because they lose 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of their top tacklers from last year that you're trying to figure out, what they're going to do. And you don't want them out on the field all the time. We're going to be running the ball, controlling the ball. I think you're going to take team unders again. Preach the first half. Do not do preach the first half is first half unders with this team. And I think I'm going to go under the 4.5 for DraftKings this year, but we'll see what they're able to do in the coming years. I think it's going to be tough.
Yeah, this is just a team I just don't have a strong opinion on. There's just too many questions, but I don't hate that look at like unders on them. A team that I've seen a lot of bullishness on, and it's maybe not indicating the market, but maybe as like a flyer or a long shot, Sam Houston, I may not qualify. I was talking about UTEP, FIU, and I think that some people are talking themselves into it because of a veteran coach like Mike McIntyre and a lot of returning production. And what I've learned is returning production doesn't just make you good. It doesn't make just because you have guys coming back. If they suck, that means they still probably suck. So see, where are they? FIU ranks. Sorry, taking me a while. Okay, they are 42nd in returning production, 16th on offense. They return Keontae Jenkins. They return Lawrence at running back. So they were still outside the top 100 in most offensive metrics, so I'm not that excited about it. The defense was decent. They couldn't get pressure, but they were good against the run, 37th in unweighted EPA per rush. So, Luke, my question is, do you see a big leap coming for FIU? Because I just don't know if I see it. They were frisky last year, but the offense really let them down. I don't know if it's getting that much better.
I see a slight increase. I wouldn't say it's going to be a huge increase like Sam Houston. We started off hot. We've just gotten a little bit cooler in our takes going forward. But Florida International, those are one of the teams that I highlighted in for DraftKings. I have them at 4.5. I've got 4 wins that I feel pretty comfortable. So hey, I just need you to get another win.
Yep.
Later in the season, and I've got 3 toss-up games. It's okay, I need you to win one of those 3. I like my odds. The juice is on the under, so let me take the over, and try to get that. We talked with Jake, or not me. I think I was on vacation this week. Justice talked with Jake Gibson from Pause Up Podcast. He said in 2023 they just threw the ball deep, and they had these wide receivers running a lot of choice routes, and they would all choose to go deep, and they weren't really doing so. They're going to be a little bit more efficient this year, and you're not going to see as many deep plays that we saw in 2023. So you might see, maybe I'm going to do some first half unders here with Florida International. You're not going to see that big play. The ability is there, don't get me wrong, but it's something that the offense wasn't trying to do last year, but then the receivers would just read things, and then they would all just go deep. And that's something that they're not going to do this year. Yeah, you bring Jenkins back. He gets thrust into the fire there early, does pretty good. Then you got Dean Patterson at wide receiver, and you got Washington wide receiver. I think I do like what they're doing this year in building for the future years. I do feel like they can go over 4.5 wins. Yeah, I'm kind of like you. I'm tempered a little bit about, everybody else might be on board. I'm not quite there.
Yeah. And then rearing out the Conference USA, we have Kennesaw State in their first year. Win total 2.5. They're not eligible for the conference championship game. I don't believe we're going to have to worry about that. And if you go to last year, it looked a lot like what Sam Houston State did the year prior to making the leap. So 2 seasons ago, a lot of red shirts, kind of a mulligan of a year, knowing that they're making the leap next year. A lot of guys redshirted. There's 7 guys with experience on the offensive line, so that helps. Not a ton of experience at quarterback. This is a run-heavy offense. The guy I see in most of the preview magazines and things I see is Davis Bryson. On the defense, they returned 10 of their top 12 tacklers, so there is something going there, but they do lose probably their best player in Deontay Morris in the secondary. Luke, do you think Kennesaw State can be competitive in their first year? I'll give timid expectations. Can they just be competitive?
Yes, I think they'll be competitive, almost like you saw with Sam Houston State when they made the jump up, and they were the last team to win an FBS game, and here I am talking about them to maybe win like to be in the Conference USA championship just a year later. So I think Kennesaw State could do this. DraftKings has them at 2.5. I tend to side with the juice and the under at 2.5. I want to see it type thing because we had a lot of questions. We interviewed Kai Maletti from the Owl Chat podcast. Hey, tell us what we need to know about this team making the jump from the FCS. And like you said, they redshirted a lot of guys. They did like, oh, we're playing this FBS team. We're going to throw out our A team here, and it's like, all right, now you guys are going to take a break. You guys aren't going to play this game and this game. And when I was going through the production and putting these questions together, like you said, there's a lot of offensive linemen that had experience. I was like, wow, that's a lot. Tell me more about this because it looks like when they play left guard, people who don't know, left guard and right guard are very, very different. Left tackle and right tackle, very, very different. They are the tackles, but like everything is inverted, and like some people can make that switch. And it seemed like if you played left guard, you also play right guard. If you played left tackle, you played right tackle. And that was amazing to me. I'm like, is this like a you do more with less type thing, or it's like, oh, we're just really hurt and we're shifting guys around between players being hurt and trying to keep red shirts. You just kind of had to play everybody. So this team maybe looked on paper worse last year than they really are. A guy that they're going to be run heavy. They used to be a triple option team. I'm trying to remember the Georgia Tech quarterback that would run all the triple options, but their coach came from that regime. But then with the whole cut blocking stuff, they had to change, and they're not doing a true triple option in that facet, but they are going to be a run heavy team. The guy that you need to know is Gabriel Benyard. If there are player props on him, I don't care what they are over, just bet overs. I feel really good about
Gabriel,
him.
one more time for the crowd so I can write it down too.
Gabriel Benyard. So Gabriel Benyard. So the main guy in the backfield is going to be Michael Benefield. He's going to be the guy that's returning. He had 546 yards rushing last year. He's going to be the main guy. You've got Benefield, who is a returning guy. They kept him with a red shirt. They were actually surprised that he stayed. In 4 games, he had 18 attempts for 116 yards and a touchdown. He was the second leading rusher, like rushing touchdown guy at 1. Benefield had 6. Benefield, again, it's going to be the main guy. But then when you go over to when I was looking at the wide receiver room, I was like, okay, who's this Gabriel Benyard guy? That guy had the most yards received. Wait, he was in the running back room. Wait, what is he? And we talked to Kai, and he was like, he's an offensive weapon. He's going to line up at slot a lot. He is a running back on the roster, played 4 games. Everybody else played 9. He ran 70 routes. He had 20 targets. He had 14 receptions. He had 333 yards and 4 touchdowns. He played in 4 games and led the team in receiving touchdowns. Like, not saying like whatever, you had 20 targets. It's not like they're passing a whole bunch, but people who are playing college fantasy football, I'm writing an article, going to go on Fantrax, but he's a guy that I'm like, hey, you might want to pick him up early because you're getting wide receiver stats, 1 PPR stats out of a running back that could, again, not get a lot, but hey, you're getting this 70 routes. The guy who led it was Isaac Foster, that he led the room with 161 routes. Or no, it was Blake Bohannon at 186. Then it was Foster at 161. And then Carson Kent, their tight end, another name to know, he ran 93 routes. And then it's Benyard, a running back at 70. So he's going to be a force to be reckoned with. If you can do prize picks, player props, anything on Gabriel Benyard, he's the guy that you really need to know in this offense. And they held him back running a lot because I wanted to keep that red shirt. So expect that to be a name. If you want to play NCAA football, maybe he's a guy that you want to play with at Kennesaw State and get a whole bunch. But he is a guy to know. As I never been so excited about a 2.5 win DraftKings Kennesaw State team, but he's this guy that people don't know about that they need to know about him.
Hell yeah! You look at the schedule. They get screwed because they have to host Liberty. They go to Western Kentucky, and they host Jacksonville State. So it's not like the schedule does them any favors. They play UT Martin that they should beat. I think FIU, sorry, at the end of the season they could get. So there's two, but there's not much else there with Louisiana being an upper tier Sun Belt team and Sam Houston being on the rise, those being their home games. So maybe they could steal a road game, but it's just not a team worth getting involved with from a win total market. I think that there's more to chew on there. Luke, we've crushed it. I appreciate it. We made this pretty timely as well. A lot of great nuggets. You and Justice and all the guests have done an awesome job really giving some unique insight into a conference that is frankly undercovered. I try my best to get some smart people on to help me with the preseason process, but you've done a great job. So please, in this time, before we do best bets, tell us a little bit more about what you guys are doing at the G5Hive. You guys are awesome. And everybody should be checking out your work, especially at the G5 level and also your work at Fantrax.
Yeah, so thank you very much. We love coming on and talking about the G5, but like it all started with an idea about a year ago, roughly. To date, I reached out to Justice. I was like, hey, I have this idea about just covering the G5 teams because, like you, I like to dabble in some sports betting, and like as I grow older, I am not opposed to like things aren't as crazy. Like if you want to say, hey, we didn't land on the moon. When I was younger, I was like, yeah, we did. Like this conspiracy theory isn't like as I get older, I'm like, you know what? I don't know. Maybe we didn't. I don't care enough to argue with you. Go ahead and believe what you want. It's like if you're in that scheme where you believe that there are conspiracy theories out there, well, who's going to rig a game, a Kennesaw State versus Jacksonville State? They're going to worry about either your Alabamas versus Auburns. So if you're worried about these conspiracy theories, the G5 is where you're going to get your edge. But it's like, how do we get to know these G5 teams? Because that information is not out there. And I was like, I like to talk to people. I like to get to know people. I like to build relationships. And it's like, I'll just reach out to him. And he's like, can we do that? I'm like, I don't know. Right now, we don't have any information. If we reach out and they say no, we still have no information. So I started reaching out to these teams, and they're like, yeah, we'd love to talk about our team. We don't get enough coverage. We like this. And it was like I expected to get more no's. I think we've had like maybe 2 no's that we had to find alternate routes to go about. But it's like, hey, people want to talk about the G5. And now with the playoff format expanding, when we interviewed Memphis, they were like, their fans are like, tell us about Liberty. Oh, we don't know anything about Liberty. We're curious about Liberty because Memphis is one of those teams gunning for a spot. And now other teams around the G5 are curious about these other G5 teams. And we are that hub to give you, all the nuggets, like you said, when we're talking about Quavez Humphreys and Hunter Watson at Sam Houston, no one else is, talking about that other than the Sam Houston podcast, unless you don't have those queued up in your feed, you're probably not going to, do you have time to listen to 40 or 64 podcasts a day, a week? No, we're trying to be that hub for news, and we've made these contacts and we've talked to them like, hey, when big information comes out, let us know. We'll talk to you when we see things that are weird so we can give the fans information about what's going on. Like, hey, we had a big O-line injury. We had a big coaching change going on or something like that doesn't get that national attention, so you can be in the know. And then again, fantasy football is starting to blow up. Part of a writer at Fantrax, where they are the only place currently that you can draft a fantasy football team for college. That is a real thing. So I do articles for them. It's like, where can I help people get edges? It's like, all right, Gabriel Binyard, Kennesaw State, probably no one's drafting him. You can get these edges here. And like I said, that it started with an idea, and then Justice does all of the, I shouldn't even say a lot. He does all of the video stuff and knocks out intros and outros. And when it comes to the football season, we will be live on Mondays. It will be mainly looking at football recaps from across the G5. And then we will do a little spin on fantasy where we do waiver wires, because on Fantrax, they run Tuesday morning. So you have to put in your waivers Monday night, especially when MAC starts and you got games on Tuesdays. And what do I got to do? We will be that hub of information that you guys need to know for college football, for real football, and real football has an impact on all those other things. Betting, first half unders. When we do these interviews with these guys and you're curious about a team, hey, what are your where are your strengths? Where are your weaknesses? If there's a cold that comes into that locker room and takes out an entire room, which one are you not worried about? Which one are you
Mhm.
really worried about? Where you take one guy out of there and like the whole team falls apart. People get sick. There's a lot of good nuggets in there, and we're just trying to help the fans and the average fans and the avid fans know more about these teams.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. Great little monologue there to sell G5Hive. But seriously, if you are into this and you want to bet at a high level, this is where you want to go for your G5 information. So, Luke, I appreciate it. Best bets. Do you have any that you are going to be wagering on yourself? I know you said you had a few. After talking through it, anything you want to make sure that the viewers know that you are recommending to the masses?
I would say Sam Houston over. Maybe not this year for UTEP, but UTEP going forward. I would say overs. UTEP overs on the first half seems really good. I like Middle Tennessee. I think you might be able to get some edges on maybe some unders first halves initially. Um, Trying to think. Western Kentucky, I feel like is an under at 7. I just feel like there's enough going on there with that talent level. While the system's not changing, the talent is. I feel like going under that. But yeah, those are kind of my best bets. I mean, I do feel like Liberty will win. Like even if they lose against App State, like they're that team to beat. And like I said, we're gonna have to wait till the last game of the season for my prediction on that Sam Houston. We'll see how good they are there.
Yeah. For me, Middle Tennessee State over 4.5 wins. You got that FanDuel minus 122. Louisiana Tech under 5 wins. That's at DraftKings. Like Luke mentioned, minus 115. I think 5 is the ceiling for that team, given where they're trending. And then 2 week 1 bets, because I only gave out 2 wins. I want to give out some week 1 bets. And because they'll likely be gone before we get there. 2 overs. We spoke about them. Sam Houston State Rice over 48.5. And UTEP Nebraska, there is better in the market, but I bet a few weeks ago over 49.5. I think that's totally fine as well. So 2 high 40s totals there on some offenses we are buying in 2024. So Luke, I appreciate it again. You can follow him on Twitter at Probasco Luke. You can follow me on Twitter at Reed Wallach. All my plays are in the betstamp at RW33, and all the early read plays we just shared and from the conference preview series are in the Google Sheet below in the description. Luke, until next time, man, enjoy the rest of your summer. College football, we're inside of a month. Appreciate the time, man.